All right, so I'm here with Gary Malcolm, founder of Key Growth Coaching and Consulting, and we are going to talk about leadership, communication, and the difference between coaching and consulting. So Gary, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm going to try to be as difficult as I can on you as an interviewer, okay? But yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, I'm learning to ask shorter questions.
Okay, good.
So break down the two areas that you work in, leadership and communication. Starting with leadership, give me the Gary Malcolm take.
Yeah, well, let's first take a look at those two areas. They're actually one. So it's leadership and communication, because you can't have leadership without communication. It's inherent.
You already pulled me in. Okay, the audience is
they're
leaning
not
forward.
distinct.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I work with whether it's individuals just beginning their leadership journey or they've been a longstanding CEO. Those are great. I also love working with teams and working with their leadership teams. And basically, I take them through a curriculum that I've developed and put together. And I deliver it via courses, coaching, and also kind of workshop style.
Okay. How did you come up with the curriculum?
I started in this. I started in the casino business about 25 years ago or something like that, and I rose pretty quick. And I was a general manager, my first time being a general manager, and I had grabbed onto this mentor that had, he took a liking to me, I took a liking to him, and he really helped me out. Was always there answering questions, whatever I needed. But one day, he calls himself just a sales guy, but he is coming in and he's says, "Yeah, what's your management philosophy?" And I was dumbfounded, right? Because I clearly didn't have one, and that's why he was asking. So,
okay,
over the course of time, I developed, started, hey, what is my philosophy? How is it that I want to manage my people? How is it that we're most effective in doing what we want to do? And that's a pretty complex environment. And so really it just started to just take root in a little bit of what works, what doesn't work, right? Little trial and error, because that's what you do when you're a young manager and you don't have a lot of training and development in that area.
Yeah.
And really just came across what I call being the voice of the business. And what that looks like is it's not what Gary wants or what Andrew wants for the business. It's actually we as all managers.
Wait, what?
Yeah. It's one to load on to business owners and founders when they're like, what do you mean it's not? What? Yeah, it's our responsibility as owners, managers, any kind of level in there of authority or position is our job is to be the voice of the business, right? And answer, what does the business want? And you can pretty much do that a whole bunch and not make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And also, especially as you're developing younger managers and younger people into positions or of any age, but they get to now like have some confidence in like, oh, if that's where I'm making my decision from, great. I might say, hey, Andrew, that was great. I got your intention. That was perfect. I might have done it a little bit different. And right. So now it becomes a coaching moment instead of a you did it wrong moment, right? So it's pretty cool.
So you're in the casino industry. You latch onto a mentor. He calls himself just a sales guy. Comes in one day and asks you about your management philosophy. What are the next steps from there that get you to this idea of being the voice of the business and that it's not Gary's voice or anybody else's voice, but it's the business's voice? How did you develop that?
Being observant. I mean, there's just like looking and watching. Sometimes your best teacher is watching somebody do a horrible job at something and go, oh, that's what was wrong with that, right? And you can really kind of take a look at, okay, if I get to that position, I'm not going to do that. Or if I'm going to, so sometimes it's not just having a great mentor, it's
like
also
parenting.
learning. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's kind of how it is. But so as I start putting that together, I am going through a lot of like just personal and training, personal professional training and development for myself. Just like, oh, I'm a sponge for this now. I want to learn. And so as I'm doing all of this, I just start integrating it into my philosophy and doing everything. And so it really that's how it really ties into that leadership and communication piece.
At what point did you make the jump to, I'm going to try to help other people with this philosophy that I've developed?
Yeah, well, like a lot of people, there was a shift when COVID hit.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was, interestingly enough, I was out fundraising for a startup I had been working on, and imagine those conversations all dried up,
Yeah.
right, with COVID, everything is, and it just became, frankly, I was listening to a podcast that our friend Nick Hughes turned me on to called
Okay.
the Reboot Podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and it was with Jerry Colonna, as like the CEO whisperer, and I am just enjoying that podcast like it's pizza and beer on a Friday night. Give it all to me. It's so great. And I tell Nick one day, I'm like, hey, I want to be that guy when I grow up, right? And that was really it. Just a couple months later, I said, why don't I just grow up and start doing that now, right? Like I'm going to be that for people, and it's a real it's been really awesome to be able to do that for people. So it's really great.
What is different about your training versus other programs that are out there? Is it that you approach leadership and communication as a combined unit, or what else might it be?
No, it's distinct in that, like, so a lot of times we read a book to like learn more and gather more, or maybe we even might do a video series on like, hey, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to get this. What I do is more experiential, so it's more ontological in nature. It's more like, hey, we're gonna really like dive into this, because what you view as being an ideal leader for you is going to be different for somebody else, right? So if we start asking those questions, like, hey, what does leadership look like to you? You're going to have different answers. But then once we really get into what kind of leader do you want to be, then they start to see, oh, what's consistent for that is taking different actions, right? So, for instance, if I'm working with a group right now where we're actually workshopping my curriculum, so like the first one is they're a newer, fun logistics company, and they've being present for the first couple weeks, and there was only one person that was on time for every meeting at the start of the meeting, and I was like, well, this looks like a topic we better talk about, right? And so we talk about, hey, how do you feel? And Andrew, I'm going to ask you, how do you feel about when people are showing up late? What do you think? Like, honestly, not the nice guy, but what do you really think?
No, my honest opinion, it depends on how they show up when they show up late. That's my honest answer, which is probably not what you were looking for.
No, that's
but there
okay.
are some people that when they show up late, I automatically, and we can talk about this. This will go somewhere. I automatically go, oh, they were so busy.
You give them the excuse.
Yeah,
you're like,
I'm
sure they're so busy.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Like for example, if I'm meeting with a CEO, right, and I'm the director of business development, right? I think I default go, that guy was super busy. I'm going to give him a lot of grace.
Yeah.
But let's say somebody has hit me up on LinkedIn and they're trying to sell me a lead list,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And they want to be on Zoom, and then they don't show up for the Zoom, and I'm like, all right, come on, this jerk.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess that's my honest answer when somebody shows up late.
No, it's great. It's and often what I get, the high percentage of everybody that I talk to going through my curriculum, they always say, like, it ends up, once we've dove into it, it's, yeah, I feel disrespected, or they don't value my time. They don't value, right? But at some point, it ends up being there.
Yeah.
And then when I ask the question, well, how about you? Are you always on time?
No, I'm not always on time.
Yeah.
I think when I show up, I try to jump right in and be as productive as possible. So I don't necessarily call a lot of attention to it, other than maybe a thanks for your patience. Let's dive right in.
Yeah. So, but you do acknowledge it a little bit, sounds like.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I'm late. Jump into this. Apologies, whatever. Yeah. That's great, because some people will just like literally step right over it and pretend it didn't happen, right? And so that's got an impact, because you're still left, the other person or people are still left feeling like, a little disrespected. They don't value my time like theirs, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Without the acknowledgement there. But let's take a different approach. To really look at what's different about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
How valuable is trust to individuals and organizations in business?
But probably make the argument that it's invaluable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like scale of 1 to 10, it's a
10.
yeah.
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 11 maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like it's immediate. And yet it's the number one source for inefficiencies in companies is a lack of trust. In fact, Microsoft spent millions and a ton of time and energy on recreating trust in their organization at one point, right?
Okay.
So, what's interesting is what do you believe about trust?
I think trust is one of those things that you don't know if you can trust a person until you trust them. So it takes a little bit of a leap.
Would you say that it's earned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, sorry. I think it's given.
Oh, you've been through my course.
Actually, I've not been through your course. You know that. But
Yeah.
I do think that subconsciously, that was a good example of that's in my brain because I heard you say it
Yeah.
from a stage at some point.
Yeah.
And the argument stuck with me. I can't even tell you why I remembered to switch my answer to given, not earned. But I do trust that that is the right answer. So walk us through why it's given, not earned.
Yeah, well, let's see. Pick somebody in your life you don't trust. You don't have to use by name. Just bring them to your mind. That's
Got
all.
it. All right.
And it might be that
Thought
you
I
just
was
don't
gonna have
trust
to do
them
this on camera, but okay.
yeah. It might be that you just don't trust them to be on time. I'm not like don't trust that you don't have. Something. Got somebody?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. When are you going to trust them?
When I decide to.
And when's that? Is it a date on the calendar? Is it when they perform an action X amount of times?
It'd be great if I could define that, but I think it's probably when they've exhibited enough responsibility in other areas.
Okay, so you have a specific person in mind. So what would that look like?
I think when they have consistently exhibited responsibility.
Yeah, you see the cycle here, right? Because you can't actually, because we don't walk around with a trust debit card in our back pocket going, oh, look, Andrew, if you don't screw up in the next month, I'm going to trust you again.
Yeah.
Or look, Andrew, 5 more times and
it's
you're
almost
going to
more
be
intuitive.
trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the difference, right? That's why trust is given and not earned. Because ultimately we have to give it. It's not always a given commodity. It's not something that we can say, yep, oh, they've gotten to a point, because we don't walk around doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just not something we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you're sitting there going, well,
now I'm pondering a lot of things.
Well, now you got to wonder, the next question is, right, well, shoot, if it's not earned, what's the deal? Like, what if it's not in existence, right? Mm-hmm. What if it's not existence for my company? What if it's not existence for part of my leadership or part of my leadership team?
Yeah.
Because if it's not earned, what do? Well, that's the point where you create it.
Okay.
Right. So I distinguish creating versus earned, right? So creating is a multitude of ways. We talk about being your word, showing up on time, doing things, being reliable, all of those things. Mm-hmm. And then another one we always forget to do because it's kind of vulnerable is, hey, Andrew, do you trust me? And is there something that you don't trust about me? Like actually checking in with the other people that we're working with or dealing with.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't think anybody other than you walks around asking people, do you trust me?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think usually when you ask, do you trust me? It almost triggers the opposite reaction of like, should I not?
I may not ask it just like that, but you get my point.
Yeah. So how do you go about creating trust? Is that through coaching? Is it through consulting? Is it a mixture of the two? How do you create trust?
Yeah, I'll just use the organization that I'm working with right now again as a good example. So it's coaching and consulting is kind of tied together too, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm consulting with this company. Part of the consulting side is I'm coming alongside the CEO, advising, coaching, supporting, mm-hmm. helping prioritize, do decisions. But I'm also working with the team itself and literally building their leadership along the way. So how do we create trust? Well, now they're more reliable to be on time for their meeting, or if they're not going to be late, they communicate.
Okay.
So it's like it's a small example, but that's what it looks like, right? Like that on the court.
Okay. What's an ideal outcome? A company engages you. What are the benefits that they're going to receive by the time the engagement is complete?
Freedom.
It's a great succinct answer. I wish my questions were that succinct.
Yeah. So that's kind of the result I look for, right? Is that they and their teams have more freedom in moving their business forward. So that means giving them the tools, giving them the structures to help put in place to create that there's actually more freedom around moving things forward.
Would you say that discipline equals freedom?
No, I would say.
Sorry, I was just pulling Jocko.
No, it's great.
I was pulling Jocko out of it.
No, it was great. I love it. I love it because I always joke around like I'd be Buddhist if I had the discipline, right? Like I don't. I don't. There's no discipline's great, like because it's when and I like to use structure instead of discipline.
Okay.
Right, because discipline kind of has this like, oh, I've got to be disciplined. I've got to, there's like a wrong or a right to it, right? And structure is more about, well, let me say it this way. When things don't work, it's almost always a source of a structure not being in place. When you forget to do something for your wife, what's the cause?
It was on the family calendar and not my work calendar.
Right. So some part of that structure didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't copy that event over to my work calendar to make sure that I got it done. It's that simple. Almost all the time, there's just some sort of structure out of place.
Okay. Do you have a set of structures or frameworks that you use as templates? Like this worked with this company and this company that I'm now working with shares some of those attributes. Do you ever kind of borrow from past experiences?
Of course. But I try not to. What I try not to do is get stuck in, oh, this is the way, because every culture is gonna be different. Even if they're doing the same thing, they might, hey, actually, we like to communicate this way, and others might like to communicate that way, because that's another structure to put into place. Almost every time, like if you were to ask me, hey, what's a common thing you run up against? Communication, right? Within an organization is. Frustration around, well, I sent this email 2 days ago and I haven't got a response yet.
Yeah.
That's because nobody's created that there's alignment or agreement that an email needs to be returned in an hour or a day, in a week. Like, what is it, right? So an organization needs to come up with those. And if you're using some sort of messaging, text or Slack or whatever, there might be an agreement to have in place within your organization. Hey, look, you need to respond to the messaging 2 times a day. Or whatever it is, you pick, morning and an afternoon. Or emails like we just put in with this company, it's like, hey, we now have a new agreement that we're going to respond to emails within 24 hours. Okay. So it's just once a day, at least they're responding to emails or putting a structure in place so that they do that.
Yeah. You said the word agreement probably 4 times just in that last answer. But I was thinking before we shot today, I was going to ask you, how important is agreement when it comes to leadership and communication?
Yeah, what's great is like and this is like the same way, kind of like answering the last question in a little bit different way, right? Like, is there a structure that I would put? Well, I could tell you, yes, go use this structure, but you don't have any buy-in.
Okay.
So agreement is great because we might talk about it and say, hey, this is our agreement. Now, does that work for everything? No, because sometimes you as a CEO or whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to say, no, this is the way we want to do it here. Great. That's fine. That's agreement because that's actually what we said is the structure that's in place for that.
Yeah. How do you strike a balance when you have teams that like to communicate in different ways? And I guess the analogy that I'm going to use here is some people really like Fred Rogers. And some people really like Gary Vaynerchuk. They communicate in extremely different ways.
Yeah.
So when you have teams that, you have a leader that likes to communicate like Gary Vaynerchuk, and you have a team that wants to be talked to the way that Fred Rogers talked to us. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think it's got to be done within the organization, right? Like you can't do it in a vacuum.
Mm.
So we actually need to raise our hand and say, hey, there's a gap here between I'd like to be communicated to this way, and then this group is communicating that way, and being able to actually gain alignment, right? On, hey, this is the way we're actually going to do it. Or when we're talking with this team, this is what it is. And when we're talking with that team, this is what it is. But without an alignment or agreement, then everybody's kind of like guessing, or what happens is trust starts slipping, right? Not being there because don't have a reliable communication way of being, or way that you've had of agreement. And so now could be the person sitting over there going, well, I'm not sure what to do is what's the right way, so I'll just stay back, right? So in creeps in the inefficiency, right?
Yeah.
Like
the lack of structure.
Gary,
you and I met through a kind of a startup organization that you still do some work with. So I want to kind of talk about the power of community and how we got connected and what you're doing with that community.
Yeah, Founders Live. It's really great because, as I was doing my own startup and totally diving into this community around Seattle in particular, I had no idea what it was to be a startup. I'd been managing brick and mortars my whole life. To be involved in a tech, it was kind of weird, right? And just like the support, the growth and the learning opportunity within just getting exposed to that community and that kind of network was amazing. And I really love what they stand for in particular, which is why I'm now part of their leadership team, is that like they're really committed to entrepreneurship and equality throughout the world, not just in one spot. But in doing so, I've found myself now a part of 4 or 5 different startups, and coming alongside with CEOs and really helping and supporting them grow. And they're all very mission driven. Turns out that's what I love doing, is things that make a difference for people.